the Dallas On Air studios in beautiful Dallas, Texas. This is Next Issue on DallasOnAir.com. And now, here's your host, Clay Harrison.
Hey now, everyone. Welcome to the Next Issue podcast. We are a bi-weekly comic book podcast out of Dallas. We're part of the Dallas On Air Live family. Usually my co-host, Kyle Condis, is here. He is absent today due to oversleeping. Hopefully he'll join us maybe for the second half. With me today, the Authority. How are you doing, Adrian?
It's too early in the morning, but I'm doing well.
It's so early. About the only good thing about this is Whataburger in the morning.
Word.
Favorite taquitos.
Yes.
Hashtag taquitos. Sponsor us.
Since our last episode, the unfortunate passing of Len Wein, the great comic book writer, contributor to all of comics, happened. And we've been talking about Len. We've been researching and looking at his work, his history, and it's just incredible. And we got together. We decided we were going to have a conversation about the man, his work, the people in his life that kind of went on to make what we know as modern comic books. I mean, the modern age of comics, because a lot of when Len started happened when him and Marv were touring the DC offices.
Right.
So imagine that you and your friend, when you're like 20-something, you go, we're just going to tour this place till they give us a job.
Right. Well, it wasn't even 20-something. They were still teenagers. They would skip high school.
Yeah.
And go every Thursday.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing because his best friend's Marv Wolfman.
Right.
And if you don't know Marv Wolfman's work, you should, strictly for Teen Titans alone.
Right.
What's your history with Marv? What do you know him from?
Mainly Teen Titans. Him and Prez's run on Teen Titans.
Yeah. How influential was that book to you?
To be honest with you, I really wasn't a Teen Titans fan.
Yeah.
Through Kyle, I've become more of a fan, going back and reading some of the older stuff, and it's great.
Yeah.
Like, I understand their place in history. I just never latched on to them.
Yeah.
And I probably should have, thinking back on it now. I was more of a Marvel guy, but, anytime you get together with a bunch of nerds and talk geek stuff, Wolfman and Perez run on Teen Titans always comes up.
Yeah.
So it's there. You can't hide it. And that's the amazing thing as we go through this is how many of the greats that Len Wein worked with or friends with and shape what we think of comic books today.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, and Marv would go back and forth between DC and Marvel over
Right.
time, create characters like Blade.
Right.
One of the early adapted characters to film.
Right.
For me, Teen Titans was like one of the best DC books I discovered as a kid because I was a huge Marvel guy. I was a Marvel zombie, read tons of X-Men. And then I kept hearing this Teen Titans book.
Right.
You got to read this. You got to read this. And first of all, you look at it and you go, wow, this art's amazing.
Right.
Like, and then you discover George Perez and you go, wait a minute, I got to find everything this guy's done.
Right.
and then you get into the story, and it's pretty much amazing to see the stories that were being told back in the 80s
Right.
becoming kind of what the films are now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot. That's the whole thing with we got Blade and we got Spider-Man, and then we got
X-Men.
Then we kind of went through a period where the comic books movies weren't that great, other than those titles.
Yeah,
they weren't that great. And when
What are you talking about? Dolph Lundgren as the Punisher was awesome.
Yeah, I can't even take that seriously. But you take someone like Kevin Feige, who was an executive or associate producer on the X-Men films and stuff, and having this vision of why are you rewriting all this stuff when you have
existing.
There's a reason why everybody's fans of these people, and it's not because of the art's part of it, but there's these fantastic, rich stories that are already there.
Right.
You just mine from it. That's all you have to do. And I think that set us on a pace of getting better comic book. I think the more they try to steer away from all that stuff, all the history and the storylines that are from the comic books,
Yeah.
the more chances we're getting a bummer of a comic book movie.
Yeah, well, like the Judas Contract is obviously the big Teen Titans book that we're talking about, the storyline, and that even got kind of like even the kid cartoon had Terra, had Trigon, had all these other elements that were part of that, and are the modern day Titans.
Right.
Before that, I don't think you had seen Cyborg as one of the originals. Starfire before that, I don't think was there
she
either.
didn't come over. She didn't come over till a lot later, maybe the 80s.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing, going back, the Teen Titans, when I think of Teen Titans, I'm thinking back when I was a kid in the 80s, or as a early teen kid in the 80s. But that book's been around since like the mid 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, because that was the first book that Marv wrote on. It was 1968 Teen Titans. Len would go on to work with Bernie Wrightson and create Swamp Thing, which is an amazing character when you think about it, because a lot of film nerds are going to say, "Oh yeah, those campy films," and there was a short-lived TV series on USA. But
the TV series was actually really good.
It was, and it's kind of hard to find on DVD, but
better than it had business being, honestly.
Yeah, it was kind of he was kind of a background character in the story of the swamps. It was it was more of like what the comic was, and
yeah, I mean, and you really got some great character development in there. You fully developed Dr. Arcane. You really had a great look at the psychological torture that he was going through.
Yeah,
it's a great series.
Yeah, and all Len Wein creations. It's amazing to kind of see the divide on those two, because people will want to point out the movie and go, "Well, it was campy, but it was fun."
Yeah.
But then anyone who's read the Alan Moore run will go, "This is one of the definitive runs in comics. If you want to know Swamp Thing, you want to know this."
Yeah.
But I think you definitely need to go back to the origin and read Len's work.
The problem with that is that, because I've gone back and read like the first 10 issues of Len's run on Swamp Thing. The writing's great, but it's very dated, and which could kind of turn people going back on it a little off. But in Alan Moore, although it's still from the 80s, it still holds up.
Would you blame the Comics Code Authority on what Len was writing in the 70s versus what Alan was doing when it was a Vertigo title?
Anything from the 70s, 60s, and 70s, you can blame on the Comics Code.
Yeah,
that was. Once that kind of went away, you start getting into this. I mean, really kicked into high gear. You got the Alan Moores and Frank Miller's run on Daredevil and Batman, and you start getting those type of storylines that really change what comics is. So, yeah, you can blame it on the Comics Code.
Yeah, but the thing that really stands out is Bernie Wrightson would go on to become kind of the look of horror in comics up until his passing last year.
Yeah.
He's like, if you hunt down Bernie Wrightson's work, you're going to be amazed at some of the people that have pulled him out of comics, like Stephen King, and had him, draw in a few of his novelizations.
And movie work.
Yeah, he's done a lot of design work that's amazing. Like, I think that would probably be one of my top 5 pages. If I could get some original art, I would want to be able to afford some Bernie Wrightson and have that up in my house.
Well, like I said, I have a print. I didn't get I really didn't understand who I was talking to when I met him last year. I went to the Dallas Comic Book Show last year, and I'm walking around, and because I've heard of Bernie Wrightson, right? And I've heard of Swamp Thing, and there was a total disconnect because I've seen pictures of Bernie when he was younger, and the guy that was sitting in front of me was kind of old. Like, you could tell his health was not good.
Right.
Like, he was on an oxygen tank.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so, yeah.
And so I'm sitting there talking to him, and it just threw me off that, this guy schlubbed all the way to Dallas for this comic book show. And I got this really great print and he signed it for me.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't get any original art, but he got the print and he signed it for me. And then of course I would go home from the comic book show and start reading some of his stuff and how awesome he was, and I was like, man, that's really cool. I got to meet this guy. And then of course he passes away earlier this year.
Yeah.
And then because I went back and started reading Bernie Wright's and stuff, I got familiar with Len Wein, and then his passing, like I said, it kind of hit me kind of hard when you asked me to do the show. I'm like, yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
You know, it's going back to that Teen Titans. He created on that very first issue. Him and Wolfman created the first Russian superhero, Red Star.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then what's funny is that 2 issues later, he actually created the first black superhero for DC.
Right.
And Carmine Infantino was the editor at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Nixed that idea and had somebody rewrite that issue.
Yeah, because he what I had read was that if you had, and I'm assuming that they mean any minority character, the book wouldn't sell in the South.
Right.
That was the way it was explained in what I've read. But Len does an interesting thing after that character, because he starts to create a couple of iconic characters for Batman and for Suicide Squad.
Right. And, well, he created a series of characters, and we'll talk about it, we'll get to it here in a little bit, that really changed my view of comic books altogether. And got me reading comic books heavily. And, but it's just funny how he was really innovative in bringing in diversity. And, you know, that's kind of a big issue in comics today, but whatever reason. But he really did try to diversify some of the characters he created.
To me, when we start to talk about diversity, I always get to Dwayne McDuffie.
Yeah.
Because his statement on diversity is just representation.
Right.
That a kid wants to read a book and look at someone like himself and be the hero.
Right.
And that's going to affect a lot of kids. Every kid wants to pick up a book and find himself in there, whether he's the hero or the sidekick. When they did sidekicks for a long time, that representation is very important to the reader.
Yeah. And that was true when I was growing up, you know. And they, you know, kids these days, you know, we joke off air about me and my daughter and some of the things that she will never have to understand. And you know, it's funny how we talk about, you know, kids these days don't know how rough we had it. My black characters were Black Panther, Power Man, and early Black Lightning.
Right.
So I mean, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so. And then if you were black female or just a female in general, you were pretty limited too.
Misty Knight.
Yeah.
Night Nurse.
Yeah.
You're going to get into some of the supporting characters.
Right.
That's where it's really going to matter.
Well, I guess she did start really becoming a major player in the 80s. Well, I wouldn't call it major because Luke Cage isn't really a major book.
Yeah,
never has been.
Well, you had Luke Cage, you had Iron Fist. She was in that. You had Heroes. What's kind of neat is seeing John Byrne, what John Byrne would do, Misty and Colleen. A lot of people don't know that John Byrne's wife was like a fashion designer, and so a lot of the women he would have the art available for fashion, and so you will see women drawn by John Byrne with looks like no one else.
Right.
And when you go through, that's why there's this appeal to his art. I mean, other than it just being beautiful, but you had just different takes. I think that's why Lois Lane will always stand out in Man of Steel.
Right.
All the women throughout the X-Men run, but specifically on Dark Phoenix Saga, because you see them in every element. You see them out to see Dazzler.
Yeah.
You see them in the training room. You've got every costume that Kitty Pryde ever wears.
Right. When they go to the Hellfire Club.
The Hellfire Club look. I mean, it's amazing. And again, you know, when we start to talk about Len, we're going to have to talk about the X-Men reboot.
Yeah.
And how important that is. And I mean, for me, this begins my childhood.
Yeah. Well, and that's that is what got me in the comic, or really
X-Men?
Yeah. When that was rebooted, and someone said on Twitter when I was doing my research, when Len passed away, they're the greatness of Len Wein was so great that when he joined the X-Men were just 5 white kids from five white kids going to school.
Yeah, and
that was the tweet.
And had been reboots.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many like you talk about Stan and Jack doing X-Men. Like after 42 issues, they started reissuing those old comics, and so it wasn't until they looked at rebooting it, and Len goes, "Well, I got this character I created in Hulk,
Right."
And I want to use him. And what's weird is Wolverine actually started out. I've been watching interviews with Len,
Right.
and the weirdest thing is Wolverine. Wolverine was going to be a mutated animal.
Right. Well, I watched that interview with him and Stan Lee,
which is a great one. I'm going to try to I'm going to try to put together a playlist of some of the great interviews,
right?
And we'll post it on our Facebook and Twitter page.
But he, no, it wasn't that interview. It was.
There was one at a con that was really great. I
think this was at a con. This was the one where I think he was at his office and the lady and he had his dog there, and the lady's just in her face the whole time. But he totally denied that. He's like, I don't know where that came from. He was always a human.
Really?
Yeah. He's like, he's always been a human. You know, he was always a human. Just but she brought that up, and he was like, and it was just, they went into like this 5-6 minute conversation about that. And he kind of poo-pooed that away, but it was just it's funny how just kind of rumors just kind of grow, legends.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because now it's almost mistaken for fact.
Yeah,
or at least the way I heard it. So he creates Wolverine and puts him in this Hulk book, and then they're going to reboot the X-Men, and so he creates characters: Nightcrawler, Colossus, Storm, Thunderbird, and we're just seeing diversity done for the first time in a Marvel book in a really long time.
Right.
And so Len is doing this book. He is doing X-Men. He's doing Hulk. He's doing another book, and he's got to give one of them up. And so he's not sure what book he wants to give up. And there is this proofreader outside of his office who wants to do X-Men. He's just I guess you would say back then he was a bullpen guy.
Yeah.
And
well, he was his assistant.
It was his assistant.
He was his assistant editor or something like that. I think that's what his official title was. So his office was like right outside, and he was talking to somebody else, and he was like, kind of raised his hand. I'll do it. I'll take it. Yeah.
And so they get this guy Chris Claremont, and he would go on to do the book for 17 years.
Right.
And so right now we've seen Len, and he gets into comics, and everyone around him is a comics god.
Right.
I mean,
everybody. Well, and the thing about it is we skipped over a little thing that when he left Swamp Thing, he handpicked Alan Moore to take over that run.
Yeah.
And was the editor on that run for him. And we all know what came Alan Moore. So
yeah, I mean, Len is very influential in bringing a lot of British talent here,
right?
And Alan Moore being probably the biggest,
right?
I can't imagine what comics would be like without Alan,
right?
If we go through like everything, I mean, like if you don't know his impact on comics, we may just do a whole episode dedicated to Alan. The death of Len really got to us because it was a lot of our childhood, but it was so sudden. We've researched for 2 weeks, and I want to do like 6 more months of research.
Right.
I mean, I honestly would love to do a documentary about the guy because it's meant so much to me.
Well, yeah. The more, like I said,
I don't feel like I've done it justice.
And we talked about it on Just a Sec and the last time I was on this show, how I'm more trying to get back and into comics. I love comics, and I just fell away from it, and how I'm getting back into it. And the more I do that, the more I realize, because when I was a kid, it was about the art. It wasn't really about the story. There were some good stories. There were some great stories, memorable ones. Because everybody remembers the Dark Phoenix saga and stuff like that. But the writing and stuff, and just and so when you're doing this research on Len, all the Titans, are just a pantheon of people. I mean, the only person that did not come up in my research of this was Miller and Mazzucchelli.
Oh wow.
Those are the only two names that did not pop up.
That he never touched, edited, or...
Yeah, I mean, he might have, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I went back and looked at some of his credits, then he probably did, but his name specifically never came up in any of the interviews or any of the, like I said, any of the research I did. But, you know, Gibbons, Cockrum, you know, hell, Infantino rejected his black superhero character, and then turned around and him and Wynn recreated a Human Target.
Oh yeah.
Later on, and which became a TV show, underrated.
TV show twice.
Yeah, twice. I forget about Rick Springfield.
Rick Springfield
in the 80s.
Rick Springfield was doing an early version of Human Target. Then it was rebooted recently. I can't remember.
Mark Valley and Chi McBride.
And
Chi McBride,
but there's also somebody else that was on that show.
Oh.
He played Kelly Leak. He also played Rorschach.
Jackie Earl Haley.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Jackie Earl Haley was on there. Guy kind of meant for comic book films.
Another Fox they just canceled way too early.
Yeah.
I'm not trapped here with you. You're trapped in here with me.
One of the great
Still one of the greatest lines of all
greatest
time.
lines.
But and the funny thing about that is that line is relevant because Len was the editor on Watchmen.
Yeah. I mean, like I really would love to know the notes and the details that Alan puts. I mean, because he's known for just exhaustive notes about every page that he does.
Right.
I want to know what's the editing process on that, because there's another interview I found that started off with like what Watchmen started as and how it evolved from that. And I think that's probably going to be the greatest contribution to comics that Len's ever done.
You've got to think, though, it's just like Len saying, you could do a little more penciling here, and it's just a Polaroid of Alan Moore going.
I'd like to believe he's casting a spell. I'd like to believe that Alan's just there when he gets notes and he casts spells.
Like a voodoo doll?
Yeah.
This motherfucker.
Which then we get it. Then I can transition to Brother Voodoo. I went through Comixology just looking at the books that have already been digitized that were Len Wein work.
Right.
And the first one, I thought, I kind of want to read this, The Origin of Brother Voodoo.
Right.
And it's not Len, but it's oh gosh. Now, I hate that I'm drawing a blank on this one. The original Brother Voodoo creator is Marv Wolfman. And him and Stan Lee are talking about creating this. We're not sure what we want to do. We kind of want to make it. Maybe he's a Haitian guy who works in magic, and we'll do Dr. Voodoo. And then Stan said, call him Brother Voodoo. So he calls up Len and he says, I got this character I want you to write. And then we get Brother Voodoo. We get the next Master of the Mystic Arts in the Marvel Universe. Which he's a strange character because he's kind of a silly-looking character to begin with.
Very much so.
But he's evolved, and now he's like one of the regular Avengers.
Right.
And
he's actually pretty decent. Well, I haven't read too much of the new Avengers stuff, but which cartoon is he on?
Well, the one thing I found was Brother Voodoo is such a strange character, and Len is writing this character, and he wants to bring him into magic. He wants to kind of have his magic overlap what Doctor Strange does.
Right.
And I don't think anyone explained to Len there's no such thing as magic because he found pieces of voodoo that he could tie together. And I'm like, what writer goes to the length of finding magic stuff that overlaps between voodoo and what is seen as, I don't know, traditional magic? What is traditional magic? What Doctor Strange does?
Right.
I don't know, but I love that story, that element of like, well, I found that, they both share astral projection. We could put that and tie that together. Like the different elements that he researches about voodoo.
I mean, but that's a mark of a great writer, right?
You know,
to go and do that kind of research. And we're dealing with comic books and science fiction, really. But
but most people are just free for all in it.
But some of the best science fiction is stuff that's based on it was the research done and it's kind of plausible.
Yeah.
Right?
Got a little fact behind it.
Right.
Swamp Thing. have you read any others? Have you just read the Alan Moore stuff? What have you gotten into? Because I know it got rebooted a while back with Brian Azzarello, and it was and Mark Miller wrote it for a while. But I don't think I've ever really
other than the going back and checking out Wrights and reading those first 10 issues and some of the Alan Moore stuff. I've never really latched on to Swamp Thing.
Yeah,
as far as a book.
Well, it was weird because as I'm doing research, probably like every other fanboy out there, I've got, action figures all over my desk.
Right.
And I look down, and I've got Logan standing next to Swamp Thing.
Right.
One of, really both his biggest creations.
Right.
But how much is Logan so important to comics and Wolverine since his creation in Hulk? Because he kind of becomes a one-man army of just in the 80s. For you young kids out there, Wolverine was in every book like Deadpool is now.
Yes.
He was the Deadpool of the 80s.
You're right.
You couldn't buy a book without Wolverine showing up. Wolverine was one of the Fantastic Four. That's how much Wolverine was in every book.
Right.
And just an incredible creation. But one of the things I read while I was researching was Len's tweet about the movie Logan, which is one of my favorite comic book films.
Right.
Just saw Logan. Oh, my God. I can't possibly think of enough superlatives to describe it. Not just great superhero film, a great film, period. And it's nice to see a guy who creates a character to see it go on to that level of other people. You get a lot of people who get real... they don't want other people to use their characters.
Right.
I mean, we know Alan Moore said that about Watchmen.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious.
Which is hilarious because Len wrote the
because they're all
Watchmen, right?
Yeah, and that's what Len, so he would go on to do all of those books after that.
Right.
And again, this is the guy who wrote League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So if he doesn't like other people writing characters that he didn't create,
well, watching, which is hilarious. I understand. I watched the interviews with Alan Moore, so I kind of understand his point of view. But that interview with Stan Lee and Len, how they were talking about, I care about it while I'm writing them, but after I'm done writing and moved on to something else, I just let people, give everybody else the freedom to do whatever they want to do. I don't hold on to that. That's my character. You know? Just kind of let it go. And both of them took the same stance on that. I thought that was really cool.
He seems to just celebrate the champions of comics.
He
seems to celebrate and enjoy and really just he's so positive. Like all the interviews I've seen with him are great because he's so excited about comics. He's happy to be there. Just even some of the recent interviews are about Comic-Con and what it was and what it is now.
Right.
And going, well, back then it was like 1,000 people would show up, and now it's such a part of the working tour. He goes, I go there and I see friends and fellow coworkers, and I just say, hey, in passing, because we're all going, and this is our job.
Right.
I got a quote here from Neil Gaiman that talks about Len, and this is probably one of the most important things too, is as he continues to work in the industry and influence people, he's influencing readers. Len, this is what Neil Gaiman tweeted after finding out about the passing of Len. Len Wein, he wrote Swamp Thing, Phantom Stranger, and my favorite comic book stories. He showed 12-year-old me that comics could be literature.
Right.
How important is Neil Gaiman to comics?
Mount Rushmore.
I mean, another modern day storyteller that everyone knows. I mean, he pulls in the goth girls to read Sandman, who would have never picked it up. Thank you for bringing a lot of females into comics, Neil.
Right. Yeah.
And what's amazing is Neil Gaiman's reading Batman. Like I would just read, I would just imagine a 12-year-old Neil Gaiman sitting around reading Edgar Allan Poe and just like I picture this kind of
dark,
a dark Peanut series with, instead of Charlie Brown, like Neil Gaiman, and he's just he's listening to goth music,
The Cure,
and he's just got a black hoodie on, and, but that influence to get a guy to come into comics is so important, and his effect on Sandman and Vertigo.
Right.
You know, I think Vertigo is a major player when you're getting into the late 80s, early 90s of books.
Yeah. Then he had, when he was at DC, he had that Justice League run, or Justice League of America run.
Yeah.
And at the time is a minor character, but ended up being, if you're a fan of Final Crisis, you know, he created Libra.
Yeah.
In that run.
Now, I haven't read Final Crisis. I got to admit, you know, when you get into the DC event books, I think the only one I'm going to go crazy for is going to be Crisis, but I really wish Kyle was here.
Right.
Kyle and I talked about the Legends miniseries.
Right.
I hadn't read that since it had been out, so I started looking into it. I want to reread it now, and I wish he was here to go through the details of it, because that was one that Len was involved in.
Yeah, well, he was involved in that. He created Amanda Waller in issue #1.
Yeah.
You know.
How important is Amanda Waller?
Right.
Who's the best character in the Suicide Squad?
Amanda Waller.
Yeah.
By far.
Because she is gangsta.
Yeah. I mean,
as Deadshot put it.
Right.
I mean, you give me 2 scenes with her, and that's her executing everyone in the room, and then at the end telling Bruce Wayne to watch out with his nighttime activities.
Right. Yeah. And the funny thing about it is like when doing the research, you realize as a nerd of color, I mean, he's created Storm, Amanda Waller, and Lucius Fox. You know, and people can kind of overlook that, but you're talking about 2 very strong female characters,
very
of color, and you wrote a black male character who's a CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah,
and
we kind of debated this a little bit because I think canon has changed, and I am trying to tie it down to where we got to the point where Lucius Fox has created most of the bat equipment.
Yeah,
he's essentially given him everything from R&D and Wayne Enterprises. But have we gotten to the point in the comics, and I think it's in the Loeb sale books.
Okay,
I'm going to have to nail this down, and if any of you guys can send me any help, just tweet at me at Clay_Harrison, because I'm trying to find the book where Lucius suddenly comes from being just an employee there to being the guy who gives all the gear to Batman.
Right.
And if anyone, I know you're listening, Daniel. You're my Batman go-to guy. Mm-hmm. Give me information on Lucius creating the Batsuit, the Batmobile. I want to know. I mean, because in the Nolan films they are, but in debating with Kyle says those aren't canon.
Yeah, he was very emphatic about that.
He was. They exist in their own universe. Mm-hmm. They are standalone, but important enough to have Morgan Freeman create all of those toys.
Right.
I mean, you got the Tumbler, and the Tumbler became something that we see in the books.
Right.
When you have pop culture influence the comics, it's pretty big. And I think we're going to see Lucius Fox more this season in Gotham. Because we're starting to see the origin of Batman. I haven't been very high on Gotham. I love the villains. Mm-hmm. I got to admit, I'm kind of curious because the Riddler Penguin stuff looks to be a lot better. I might go back and rewatch last season just to see how this goes.
Gotham got pushed to the wayside last season, so I didn't watch season 3.
Yeah.
And, you know, I look at Gotham like I look at Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, I'll admit the first season, but I can also admit that towards the end of that first season, it started getting better, and season 2 was better, and it became a better show, and people were still poo-pooing it, but I was like, I'm sitting there looking at it, and it's a better show, but it kind of got... with DVR space kind of got pushed to the side, so I need it. I'm waiting for him to post it on Netflix, season 3. That and Lucifer season 2, both of those kind of got pushed to the side.
And see, I haven't watched Lucifer at all.
I love Lucifer. The first season was fantastic.
Yeah, and
I need to pick it back up. And then I still got episode 1 of season 4 of Gotham on my DVR, waiting to be watched, but I wanted to watch season 3 first, but they just haven't released it on Netflix or Hulu.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you got a few weeks and it'll show up. How important, like when you talk about a character like Storm,
right?
person of color, how important is that to you to see in the books? Because she's a goddess. She's
Yes.
more than just a mutant in this
Right.
book. She is seen as a goddess.
Well, I mean, he was practically, everybody talks about Wolverine and how much of a badass he was, and that's the reason why people, like you said, in the 80s, when we were in our teens, Wolverine was everywhere.
Right.
But if you go back to the main X-Men book, Storm, Cyclops stayed around for a little bit, but when Cyclops left, Storm was the leader of that team, and so she was...
Hold on, I'm getting my Cyclops on.
Yeah. Your concussive blast.
Okay.
And
Continue.
But
Just these headphones.
but she was really the leader of that team, and like you said, she
She led that team. She led the Morlocks,
Yeah.
and she fought to lead the
Yeah.
Morlocks.
Yeah. And I can never. Did she ever become an Avenger?
Ooh, no, but she ran around with them. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think if she was ever on that team, and I don't think so. Or was she part? No, she wasn't part of A-Force because that was after Marvel's kind of suppressed the X books.
So Beast, Wolverine, Havoc. I don't know. I can't remember if she ever became one, but I mean, she hung around with him because she ended up marrying Black Panther.
Yeah,
Which
that's always been a weird one.
Yeah.
I don't really dig that.
Right.
What I really
Oh, look who's here.
hey
Hey, buddy.
If he's not 10 minutes late, he's on time.
Show's still on.
Mr. Kyle Condis, if you want to go ahead and set up and get his headphones and mic check, we'll continue the show. So for me, seeing all these characters, I was always like, oh, okay, well, because the way I got into comics is through Star Wars.
Right.
In 1980, I hear, they have comic books about
Talk
these
to me,
films. And
Test. How are you going to do?
There he is.
and so I get real excited. I'm like, Star Wars, this movie has changed my life, and we've got a sequel coming. I got to find out everything. I have to go to the comic book store. And so they don't have any Empire Strikes Back comics.
Right.
And they said, and so all I hear is this talk about this X-Men book. X-Men book. So I go buy X-Men, and it is a standalone story of Storm and Kitty Pryde.
Right.
Oh, is it when they're in Belasco's universe?
No, this is X-Men. I'm trying to find if it's 180 or 181 because I always get these two confused.
I know this stuff.
If we only had an expert on.
Good morning.
Sorry.
How are you doing, Kyle? You just woke up. How you feel?
As I told him, your gracious better half, I woke up at 7:30 with a major headache. Sofa into the bed and meant to get up at 8. It was 9. Sorry. But I'm okay.
All right. Well, we're let me finish this, and we're going to transition back because there was a couple things I wanted to touch on with you, specifically Legends, because I have not read that since the original. But my exposure to Storm is X-Men 180. It is a standalone story with Storm and Kitty Pryde, and just after the changes that Aurora's gone through, she's got the mohawk, she's going down the leather
Doesn't have the
look.
powers anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's going to come up in Life Death. That's, I believe, 184.
My bad. Okay, so we're close to that. Okay.
So then we would get like the 2-issue, and I believe it's Barry Windsor Smith, Chris
Yes, it is,
Claremont.
it is, yes.
Right.
One of the probably the greatest Storm storyline.
Storm-wise,
up
I'd
there,
say
yeah.
that, yeah.
Ever. And so I read this book, and it's just an adult talking to a kid and telling her what appearance is. And
What issue was it again?
180. X-Men 180.
It was 181, I think, is when they come back from Secret Wars. Yeah, okay. 181 is when they come back from Secret Wars and they're in Japan taking on the dragon.
Right.
And we see and when they're in Japan, we see this new version of Storm, the Mohawk version.
Right.
And Kitty just not really getting it, thinking like, "Oh, you're a different person because of of the clothes you wear." And she's like, "No, I'm still the same person. This is just a look." And it was kind of this, like, I go, I what happened to people fighting and capes and what I think is this? And I go, I want more of this.
Right.
Well, this was the point. I think it was like 172 when they were in Japan for Wolverine's wedding. It was the whole thing. She met Yoriko and realized, that was the thing. As she was as a character, she realized I'm missing something. I'm not able to be as the person I want to. And when she met Yoriko and did the mohawk and all the gangster kind or biker looking kind of outfit, she realized I'm able to become the person I want to be. I don't have to be this kind of petite, kind of looking superhero. It's like I can be a badass, and that's I think what opened her up to become the Storm that we know now and this day.
Yeah, that mohawk change was.
Oh yeah, and she's done it
was a
numerous
game
times
changer.
since then too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
she's gone back to it.
Yeah, the mohawk has gotten bigger, more elaborate.
Right.
I think if you've read the Extraordinary X-Men, you've seen that art because it was Humberto Ramos, who is amazing, and he just gave her a spectacular look.
The look that she had in Apocalypse, the movie, one of the redeeming factors of that movie was the
look.
They got the looks down.
What's so sad? What's so sad is that Storm probably has more storyline than Halle Berry ever had.
Yes,
and that's the
Halle Berry didn't deserve storyline.
Yeah,
that's so.
Thank you.
That's so sad that she played Storm for years, and there's no real definitive storyline for her.
No. Same thing goes for James Marsden as Cyclops. The kid who played Cyclops in Apocalypse had more character development in that one film than he did in all 4 films. How many films he was in?
He did 3, and he only appeared like in The Last Stand for 2 minutes to get blown up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've really wasted Cyclops. That was such a bummer because I love that actor. I'm excited to see though someone else play him as a kid though in the upcoming version. But again, more definitive proof that Claremont is king in X-Men. They're redoing a story we've already seen in the films.
Right.
So this, I don't know, this kind of hack guy, Chris Claremont, who did it for 17 years. I mean, really, what was Len thinking when he gave him the job to write the X-Men?
Right.
I don't know.
17 years.
Well, when I was telling you, at the last con, I was talking to Daniel Way, and he had been writing for 14 years.
Right.
And I was like, that's a lot. Like, how much you know of those characters? And then I think about what Chris has done and how many characters he created and did in there. And did they have any idea when they handed over the reins to him what would happen?
Because it's different from Larson, right? Because Larson, he created Savage Dragon, and so, that's his baby. And Claremont, he's adopting these babies, and raising and taking off for 17 years and doing it, and it's amazing when you see runs like that.
Well, and Claremont said after Len's passing, he goes, Len will never get the amount of credit he deserves for what he's done to comics. But in just this little bit of research, and like I said, I'm motivated to do a documentary style episode to put all this into a better format. But I felt like a conversation between all of us was the best way to approach it because we all can go to stories that he's done or characters he's influenced or brought in. I mean, I'm wearing a Nightcrawler shirt because you can't see my Nightcrawler tattoo because he's one of my favorite characters.
The funny thing about it is you can't even really do. After doing this research, you realize there's several people that you can't even really do like a documentary movie on comic book creators and writers and stuff like that because it would take too long. It would be too long of a movie, and Len's one of them.
Yeah,
Stan Lee, Kirby, Len Wein's one of them because you take up a 45-minute block of a movie, of a documentary, just to talk about his influence and his work.
Yeah, and if you do a film, you're going to talk about the person more than the characters, and the characters we see every day. So it's such an incredible influence. I want to go back to when we were talking about the Legends miniseries because Kyle was really big on this, and I had not read this since it initially came out, and started to revisit it. But I thought it would be best to let Kyle talk about it because you just brought it. What is that? The 30th anniversary?
30th anniversary of Legends, and this was the first major crossover right after Crisis happened. After they retconned the whole universe. And this thing. Another thing, people might not know this is the official first appearance of Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Right.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think as I was reading some stuff, it may be the first official appearance of Amanda Waller.
It is. We were talking about that
we were
earlier.
just talking about that and the character's influence. Amanda Waller is just so important to Suicide Squad. There is one run of Suicide Squad where she is not in it, and they tried to put someone else in her place, and it's 12 issues, and it's not good.
Mm-mm.
But Legends is John Byrne, the art, and this is John Byrne at his prime before he got.
Can I see?
Yeah, and I say this because not that he's not a bad artist. It just after a while he started to get where his art got to be too like blocky, almost like there was no fluidness to the characters with the way they moved. And this is when he did a comic book called I think it was Next Men.
Next Men,
yeah.
But this is like him at his prime, and I didn't realize until I was researching. Len wrote this. He wrote the book, and it was 6 issues again. major crossover into other comic books. He had Cosmic Boy from the Legion of Superheroes, who was trapped in our time at the moment. In this, this was a story arc that basically killed off the current iteration of the Justice League of America that had Steel and Vibe and Gypsy in it. And then it would become to form the Justice League International with Guy Gardner and Blue Beetle. This is what gave us Blue Beetle as a part of the Justice League of America. And so,
and let's talk about Blue Beetle for a second, because I know it's one of your favorite characters.
Oh God, yes.
So, Ted Cord.
Screw you, DC. That's all I'm going to say. Oh, fuck you. Sorry.
But
Way to alienate half your audience there, Condis.
Ted Cord is freaking awesome. He was the one character in some ways was like Peter Parker, but not like Peter Parker because he was the guy that everybody could relate to. His mentor was the original Blue Beetle who had magic powers with this blue scarab, which would become, Jamie's, the current Blue Beetle's power source. But he goes, hey, I'm an inventor. I'm smart. I own my own company. I can create this, gigantic beetle vehicle I can fly in. He studied acrobatics and martial arts, and he just became an everyday kind of person who basically became a superhero. And before we got Blue Beetle and Booster Gold, which is one of the greatest combos in comic book history, he was a part of this one. And we got Guy Gardner also, Black Canary coming out of Green Arrow was in this. Dr. Fate of all things from Justice Society of America became a member. Yes, here we go.
This page, this splash
right
page
there
is amazing.
That was probably about 2 or 3 episodes issues before they canceled it.
It's the most 80s thing of all, because you've got Vibe in his original costume.
Yes.
Vixen, Gypsy. I love
Steel.
Steel. I mean, Legends of Tomorrow has all these on here, but they don't have this look. I want them to have this episode where they go into this alternate reality where all of them are dressed like this. This would be amazing.
Firestorm's on the picture.
Firestorm. I mean, get us some elongated man.
He's coming. He's in Flash season 4.
Oh, really?
Yes.
All right. What page is that? Because I'm not getting a good visual on it.
That is page number.
Let me see what I can find out.
20 and 21 of the first issue of Legends. It's near the end. It's basically most comic books are like 22, 23 issues. That's in the very first issue. And yeah, and this is like I said, this again alone is one of my favorite stories because the premise is Darkseid is basically using one of his dudes, Gordon Gottfried, who can manipulate people's emotions and stuff to basically turn on all the superheroes.
So he's like a more powerful Alex Smith.
A little bit, yeah.
Kind of a crazy. Am I saying that right? Who's the InfoWars guy? Alex.
No, this is what I love is, and I think it was first. This is issue 2. There's a scene where we have Jason Todd of the Robin. He's got beaten down and brutally mauled by the citizens. And and you have the cops saying, "Better call the commissioner and tell him that we found Robin, or at least what's left of him." I mean,
Alex Jones. Yeah,
Alex Jones. Oh yeah, Infowars.
Yeah,
my brain's not working this morning.
I know it is way too early to try to recall all this, but Kyle woke up 10 minutes ago and it's all on the tip of his tongue.
Yep, there we go.
Get him going.
But no, Legends is one of those ones. Again, being the first major, like I said, my whole thing with DC was I was reading all the comic books, and then I started reading the later stuff, and was wondering, wait, why wasn't Superman a part of the Legion of Superheroes anymore? Superboy, what happened to Superboy? What happened to all this stuff? And you find out that they retconned. It wasn't until I read Crisis that they retconned everything, and this was the first thing that really was a big prominent role. And again, it was also one of the
we also introduced Captain Marvel, Shazam.
Yeah, no, he was in this. Yeah, and he also had a limit series that also started around the same time too. And again, this led to him being in Justice League again for about all of 6 issues. But again, it was Captain Marvel has always been one of my favorites over Superman.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just I can't name anything about the art, the story. And also, it was kind of like the launching point for Wonder Woman because she had a retcon.
with George Perez.
Exactly.
Hey, guys, we're coming up on the 5-minute mark to go, but I did want to get into something that Kyle actually has in his folder. I wanted to get into this DC Batman Hulk crossover, please.
Thank you. Yes. So during the late 70s and early 80s, DC and Marvel were doing some crossovers. And one of the first one they did was Superman versus Spider-Man. But when they also did that, I didn't realize that Len wrote was Batman versus the Hulk.
Right.
And this story was greatness. It's one time,
And this just wasn't an average comic book. This is like a super-sized comic
book. It was a huge one.
Oversized books.
Yeah, it was. They did a whole bunch.
I had this.
Oh, I still do. That's why I've been trying to find it. And I couldn't. I was kicking myself for this. Yeah, but one of my favorite scenes in here is you have Batman where he actually beats the Hulk, but the way he does this is he launches a gas bomb, and the Hulk's like, "Oh, but Hulk is too smart for Batman. Gas cannot hurt Hulk if Hulk does not breathe it." and then he basically inhales this whole thing, and Batman, I don't know where he pulls the strength up, but does a drop kick right to his suplex, and where he basically knocks the air out of Hulk, and Hulk has to breathe in the gas he does, and just passes out.
Oh.
And so Batman beats the Hulk. And eventually, and I love how they come together is because
because Batman finds a way.
Yeah.
But I love how they come together is because if you ever watched the Incredible Hulk TV series, it was David Banner always going around to find some kind of new job. And in this issue, it's basically Bruce Banner working for Wayne Tech trying to build a new gamma ray machine that's going to help take away his powers or take away the Hulk. And this whole story, if you get the villains of all things, it's like the Joker, and the Joker actually friends the Hulk is like, look at my hair, I have green hair, we're friends, and Hulk's like, oh, I like you.
But I mean, was there a better choice for a writer for that issue?
I don't know.
I mean, because considering his runs on the Hulk on both.
Yeah. I don't think there is. This is just a fun story. It's not a great story, but it's a totally fun story.
It's a fun story, and that's a great crossover too, because you have two really great properties that come together in a really, really great story.
Exactly.
I mean, I remember reading it so young, but it was so impactful on me as a comic book fan.
Yes.
Oh, hey, Kyle. In my research, I came across this little tidbit. I was wondering if you know anything about it.
Yes.
Len worked with Dave Gibbons on Green Lantern.
Oh, man. The greatness of that.
Yeah.
Just that pairing.
I do have a Green Lantern story. I just want to notice that. He did a run on Justice League of America.
Right.
And apparently one of the issues he wrote was number 110, which had a story in there as the year's most thrilling story, the murder of Santa Claus in 1973.
Right.
And the reason I bring this up because I remember telling you guys that when I was young, that DC used to have like these small digest kind of comics,
right?
And it was the superheroes for Christmas, and this was the story in there. And if I'm not mistaken, this is at least the first appearance of John Stewart in the Justice League issue.
Oh wow!
Really?
And this story
is my favorite Green Lantern.
This story will hold with me till the day I die because I didn't realize he was. Him writing this makes it even more emotional for me because that story and reading the Christmas
that was 110.
stuff, yeah.
Okay, so guys, we are coming up on the close of the show, but I know that Clay, you wanted to get into some recommended reading on Mr. Wein. So.
Actually, I'm going to pass that over to Kyle because he is huge on a lot of the DC books. I mean, if anything, I'm going to go Hulk for the first appearance of Logan.
181.
Yep, and. Or technically, if you want to be nerdy, actually, it's 180 on the last page.
Well,
actually, you're correct. The best kind of correct.
Let's just talk early X-Men stuff. I mean, he created Colossus, Storm, and Nightcrawler. So
I mean, if you want to start at 94, get out your paycheck.
Legends, is definitely. If you're a DC buff, Legends is definitely one you want to read. And also with the Hulk versus Batman, they released a Marvel versus DC crossover that has Spider-Man versus Superman, has this in there, has the second meeting of Superman and Spider-Man, and also has the Teen Titans meet the X-Men issue.
Are they all digital? Can you get this digitally?
More than likely, I bet you could.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I don't know for a fact, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, you can find at least the X-Men meets the Teen Titans almost any comic con you go to.
Okay, for all the stuff that I missed, Daniel, I know you're listening and you're going to correct us on it, so be our fact checker, please.
Right.
Especially the Batman stuff.
All right, Adrian, do you have a recommendation on Len Wein?
Other than the stuff we've already talked about, I mean, we've pretty much given everybody a great list of stuff to read. I mean, just...
Yeah, and even beyond that, I mean, know where some of these characters came from. Even though you may love Logan the film, but the character started 180.
Yeah,
check that out and see where he came from.
Right.
I think you can get all of those digitally.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
they're all.
And for those that have enjoyed this, the one thing I really would recommend, and I'm going to try to put a playlist together, is just look at the interviews with Len because he is amazing. He is happy. And for all the problems we currently have in fandom and comics and the infighting, this is a guy that loved his job and loved being here. And I don't think you'll get a better display of just what comics can be by seeing this guy in every interview, just so happy and excited to be there and work.
Right.
All right, so can we go ahead and get into plugs and get on out of here?
Yeah.
You can reach me at Clay_Harrison on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook at Next Issue Podcast and Next Issue Pod on Twitter.
You can find me
and SoundCloud.
And SoundCloud.
You can find me at Kylepedia, like it's spelled, on almost pretty much any social media platform and anything else I work on.
You can find me at Adrian_Harry on Twitter, and I post a lot of stuff for the Justice Sec Show Facebook page.
Yeah, if y'all want to stick around,
we're coming right back.
We're just about here. We're just about to roll into just a sec. But guys, thank you for joining us for next issue.
Thanks for being here.
Peace.
This is DallasOnAir.com. Stanley's not here today.